Good evening, and thank you for joining us for this evening for Community Policing Conversations, a virtual town hall meeting with the Buda Police Department and Chief Bo Kidd. This evening, Chief Kidd will share information about the Buda Police Department's community policing strategies and policies. The Buda Police Department is here to serve the Buda community, and we invite your participation in this evening's virtual town hall meeting. To submit a question, please use the question feature in the GoToWebinar settings. Staff is monitoring the questions and will pose them to the panel this evening. We may not get to every question tonight, but staff will capture every question for a future follow-up and potential future conversations. And at this point, I'd like to introduce our Police Chief, Bo Kidd, who's going to introduce the rest of the panel for this evening.
Thank you, Micah. Thank you all. First, I'd like to introduce David Marino. He's our communications director for the city. We also have our city manager, Kenneth Williams. We have Brittany Tate, who wears many hats, and we'll just say she's the executive assistant tonight. And then we also have Freddy Edmond. He's our community outreach officer, and we're going to be perhaps bouncing your questions around, but I think I'll probably handle most of them. So thank y'all for taking the time to be with us tonight. In the days and weeks following the wrongful death of George Floyd, we've received a lot of correspondence and questions regarding the Buda Police Department. It became immediately apparent that a lot of people have questions and they want answers to them. So we're here tonight to provide a platform that the community can ask questions, and we want to be able to answer your questions and hopefully begin a dialogue that can move us towards something positive, collaboration and change. First, I want to express our outrage and sadness for those that have been hurt by racism across our country, and my condolences to the family of George Floyd. This should never have happened. I believe that I can speak for the vast majority of law enforcement in saying that we too are appalled at what happened. These officers that failed to abide by their oath have damaged the law enforcement profession immensely. And this wasn't the first instance of bad, illegal behavior by police. And I think we have to start the conversation by recognizing that policing has erred in the past. People are angry, people are hurt, people are divided. We must recognize the perils of our time and make efforts to change the world we live in for the better. We need to heal, we need to strengthen relationships. And the only way that we'll be able to accomplish this is by cooperative efforts and partnership between law enforcement and the communities that we serve. I support peaceful, lawful protesters. I will always stand against the looters and the rioters. That is unlawful and does not solve any of these problems. In fact, it makes them worse. As the burning and looting has gone on, the message of unity and change has been lost in the fog of violence. What I've seen on TV for the last few weeks is not just a racial problem, but a morality problem as well. One injustice doesn't excuse another, and excusing this or ignoring this just leads to more injustice. People who aren't safe in their communities are not free, and will defend the rights of all citizens to live without violence, prejudice, or fear. You'll recognize this quote: "A house divided against itself cannot stand." Abraham Lincoln said that a long time ago. And it is still very true today. I also want to share another quote from Dr. Martin Luther King that is just as appropriate today as it was in 1963. It said, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. We need healing, not hatred." I have listened to friends and coworkers of color, and surprising to me, all of them have experienced racism. Having said that, I know racism exists in many places. Even if I haven't seen it personally, I realize it does exist. I also realize that we all see the world from a different lens. And I think it's important that we acknowledge that and respect that as well. I also want our citizens to know that much of the police reforms coming out of Washington are things that we've been doing here for many years. In my view, Texas is far ahead of most states, mandating measures that have heightened professionalism in policing. And the state agency that governs police in Texas is Texas Commission on Law Enforcement Education, or rather short acronym TCOLE. I hope to have an opportunity to expand on training, both mandated and otherwise, later in our conversation here. Having the confidence and trust of our community is essential. We've got to have it to be successful. So in areas that we have it, we need to ensure that we keep it. If there are areas where it's been lost, we must work towards renewing and rebuilding that trust. One thing I know, community engagement, positive collaboration make for safer cities and better relationships. And that's what we hope we expect to accomplish tonight. Freddie, before we move on, would you like to say a few words?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Freddy Edmond. I'm the Community Outreach Officer for the Buda Police Department. I'm also head of the Crime Prevention Division. I've been a sworn peace officer in the state of Texas for 6 years, with the Buda Police Department for 4. I have 14 years prior experience in private sector security protection services. We are here today because of something, as Chief alluded to, that was just plain disturbing and sickening. But from where I sit, it also presents an opportunity. And I hope y'all forgive me, I'm gonna get excited. I might get a little exuberant. What I do in this position is a passion of mine, not just community, but police community relations and what we can do with them and partnering together. There's a lot of information to share. I'm real glad that we have this opportunity to do this. As head of the Crime Prevention Division, we've actually been doing community outreach since our inception 10 years ago. We're celebrating our 10-year anniversary. It's something that's grown within our department, up to and including our Chief of Police, Bo Kidd, and our City Manager, Mr. Williams, approving a full-time position that took on the form of grant-approved position as crime prevention. We have a host of programs, a number of ways that we reach into the community and try to get them to partner with us. The basis of the program is quite simply engaging, empowering, and encouraging citizens to do their part to help us in our mission to deter crime and maintain order. There's a number of ways we do that: Neighborhood Watch, Business Watch, National Night Out. We do coffee with a cop events, citizen response active shooter events training, theft prevention training. We partner up with the Hayes Caldwell Women's Center, Austin Angels, mentoring at-risk youth. Also, one of my responsibilities is our Citizens Police Academy. We launched our first one this year. It's a great opportunity to help inform people about how police operate. What kind of job do we do? What kind of training do we have? Why do we have the procedures in place that we have? So, like I said, I'm passionate about this. I'm excited to be here, and it's a great opportunity for us all. I hope you'll look at it that way. I also had the opportunity to kind of set the tone, and I wanted to do so by reading to you our mission statement and our commitment to our community. Go ahead and do it right verbatim for you. This is our mission statement is something that is actually in our patrol room on a gigantic plaque. Our trainees learn it. We're able to recite it. It's something we follow, and not just as police officers, but in our personal lives as well. And it goes like this. As members of the Buda Police Department, our mission is to enhance the quality of life in the city of Buda through a proactive and professional level of community-oriented police service. Maintain a strong commitment to excellence, to ensure safety through accountability, to treat all persons with respect, dignity, and equality, and build partnerships with the community to meet current and future challenges. Key word in there, and one of the foundational elements of our department, is partnerships. We can't do this job without the community. It's always been that way in law enforcement. We've had some back and forth. The pendulum has swung both ways numerous times throughout the history of modern law enforcement. And it's swinging again. But we can do better. We can, and we will. But we need the help and the support of the community to do so. That's why partnerships are so important to this department. And I think if you look at our history in the past 10 years, we've done a phenomenal job of engaging the community and ensuring, not only ensuring the effective delivery of police services, but to be a part of the community that we serve. There's a tenet of law enforcement that hopefully I'll get to elicit on more later on. A lot of good stuff we want to share tonight, but it's the understanding that the police are the public and the public are the police. Very important if you want to look at police reform in the future of where we're going in law enforcement as a profession. Very important to remember. Also want to share with you our commitment to our community. Sorry, I don't have this one memorized. I'm going to read it right outright. We will treat everyone with fundamental fairness, dignity, respect, and compassion. We will be truthful and trustworthy. We will not compromise our honesty or integrity. When we are in error, we will admit it and do the right thing. We will treat everyone the same in the performance of our duties. We will listen. We will be accountable and provide quality service. I'm proud to serve with this department. I'm proud to work with the officers that I do. When it comes to what the future looks like, what reforms may come about, how we interact with the community and the way we serve, I think we're setting the example. An example is very important for us to follow in concern with other departments, with concern with goals and objectives, with how we want to change, how we want to develop. But this meeting is not about me, not about just about my program. This meeting is about the community and the questions you have and the answers we can provide. So Chief, I'll turn it back over to you.
Well, it's been said that we need to have uncomfortable conversations. So let's get to it. Brittany, do we have any questions coming in yet?
No, sir, not at this moment. We haven't received anything.
Okay.
But, well, I say that now it looks like they're coming in. I do just want to remind all of the attendees to type in your questions. I believe we have the hand raise disabled, so if you can utilize the question box, that would be great. Let me just go ahead and hop over here.
We weren't having to do the virtual meeting. Hopefully it won't be long before we can actually do real in-person town hall meetings, but this will have to suffice for now. Did you get one, Brittany?
Yes, sir. Are you ready?
We're ready.
Okay, first question. Do you think police officers need more training to be better equipped in handling the variety of situations they are called to handle? If so, what are some of your propositions?
Absolutely. Training, if you're going to have a professional police force, training has to be a priority. There's got to be continuing education. So any law enforcement agency that wants to be successful has to invest in training its people. You know, there are a lot in the state of Texas, there are a lot of mandated courses and a lot of the courses that are really necessary and are part of the conversation and the questions that I've got, you know, talking about cultural diversity and crisis intervention and de-escalation. These are all in the state of Texas mandated courses that every peace officer has to take. Last cycle, they mandated civilian interaction training for all police officers. So I am proud of the state of Texas. I do think that we are on at the forefront as far as other states go. But yes, training absolutely has to be a priority. And I would say on average, our officers probably get 3 or 4 times what TCOL mandates for us. That's how much we believe in the importance of training. And the city has always been very supportive of that when they fund our training budget as well. So hope that answers your question. Thank you for that.
Okay, our next question, Caleb Ellinger says, thank you, Chief, for your kind words. Last night I mentioned 3 policy changes Buda PD can make. Ban chokeholds, duty to intervene, report in cases of excessive force, require de-escalation. What conversations have you had already with your staff and policymakers about policy changes you think are appropriate?
Okay, we'll take those one by one. Chokeholds, we do not, I'm not quite sure what the exact meaning of chokehold is. A chokehold would mean asphyxiation or cutting off an airway. We've never done or been trained to do anything like that. There is a carotid restraint that our officers have been trained on, but that is a tool that would only be appropriate if the life of the officer was in peril. So that would almost be equal to deadly force. So it wouldn't be appropriate unless they were in a situation where they would also be justified in using deadly force. That was the first one. Brittany, can you repeat the second question for me? What was the second point?
Sure. So he recommended ban chokeholds, duty to intervene, report in cases of excessive force, and require de-escalation.
Okay.
Duty to intervene, report in cases of excessive force.
Okay. So let me go back a little bit. I'm not a fan of removing tools for police officers. I have had a lot of questions, and I know there's a lot of talk about, chokeholds and rubber bullets and less lethal beanbag rounds. These are all tools that in themselves are not necessarily bad. We do have less lethal beanbag rounds. We've never used them. We've never had to use them here in the last decade. We've never had to use carotid restraint. But those are tools that are available, and it's my belief that these tools really should save lives, not, if they're used properly, they are just a tool. Like a hammer in your toolbox can do a great many things, great things, hammering nails and whatnot. The tool itself is not bad, it's the manner in which you use the tool. And so just like a hammer could cause destruction, a lot of these tools could. My belief is that these other options prevent or should prevent having to use deadly force on occasion. And I've actually seen that, a situation where, not in this agency, but another one close by, that they would have been justified in using deadly force, but they tried to use a less lethal round, and it ended the situation and probably saved a life. So that's my philosophy on that. On duty to report, anytime we use force and the Buda Police Department, our officers are mandated to complete a use of force form. So what that form does is it triggers a number of reviews. So that would cause their sergeant to review, and we have body cameras. Everything that we do, every citizen interaction should be captured on your body camera. So that initial form triggers the sergeant to do the review, and they have to sign off on that form, and then that form comes up to the captain, and he has to review that incident. And after the captain signs off on it, it comes to me. And if it's a use of force of any significance, like a taser or anything greater than that, then I share that with the city manager. And if it was anything of significance, then it would also be reviewed by the city council. So that's our process and duty to report. As far as intervening, every new officer we hire, I spend time talking with them, and there's certain things that I cover with them, and one of those is their duty to intervene. I've always used the Rodney King incident, although now we're hiring young officers that weren't even born when that happened. So I would also say this, George Floyd incident is another one that has similarities. You've got officers there watching it go on, and they fail to act. They fail to do anything. So why is that? And so we impress upon them on day one, you do have a duty, and we do have to police ourselves. And that's just one of those check boxes I make. And I'll tell you what I tell our new officers, just a few bullets that I use. I tell them mistakes happen. We can always deal with mistakes. Dishonesty will end your career. We're defenders of truth and justice. I ask that they have a warrior spirit and a servant's heart. Servant's heart is something that we speak of often here because we serve the public. We are public servants. That's what we do. And if you don't have that servant heart, you're not going to be successful working here. And then I remind them that ultimately the citizens will dictate what is reasonable. I found in my career that police sometimes have gotten on their high horse and they'll say, well, we got to do it this way. It's the safest way for me to go home at the end of the day. And I always expand on that and say, well, if that's really the case, we're going to do things as safe as we possibly can. Why would you not do a felony takedown on every traffic stop you make? Because statistically, more cops die from traffic stops than any other activity. Why don't we do that? Well, we don't do that because the public wouldn't tolerate that. It's not acceptable. So I use that as just a reminder that ultimately everything that we do will be dictated by the citizens in the community that we serve. I also tell them what I expect. That's integrity over all else, cooperation, professionalism, can-do attitude. And then I tell them what they can expect from me. I tell them that they'll always be treated fairly, and I will not ask political favors. Always keep their discretion in law enforcement. Anybody that knows me well, and I tell them this, if anyone on a traffic stop ever tells you that they're good friends with me, probably not that close, because they would know better than to drop my name. That's just not the way I work. So we do talk about that duty to intervene, and that's just some of the many bullets that we cover from day one. Brittany, did I answer all of those? There was like 3 or 4 points on that, and I don't think I wrote them all down.
Yes, there was also a question regarding the requirement of de-escalation.
Yes. De-escalation is training that we've had, and that's a priority. We actually have a trained instructor here. De-escalation is important training for, especially in this day and age. One thing that I've learned in my career, your ability to communicate is the best tool that you'll have in this profession, and that can solve more problems. So that is an important part of our training here. Anything to add, Freddie?
Yeah, I was just sitting here thinking, I remember when I had the orientation with you and you talked about warrior spirit and servant's heart. And I thought about just, the element that's necessary in our profession. I think we've kind of either forgotten or need to revisit that compassion isn't actually an element of this job. I think all of our officers exhibit that in one form or another. We are here to serve. We're here to serve our community. We didn't volunteer for the job because of the great pay and the hours and the wonderful lifestyle. We actually want to be here with that servant's heart. We do have that warrior spirit, but all too often in periods of history, we've seen that just the warrior spirit has been the guiding principle in police culture, and it's not. It's not. The servant's heart is absolutely one of the most important elements in the job we do.
Thank you for that question. Do we have another one?
Okay, yes. Linda Miles asked, how do you recruit to ensure diversity?
You know, that is a challenge. You know, we want our staff to reflect the community that we serve. And, you know, as a profession, I think we are struggling and have been for the last 4 or 5 years to recruit new officers. You know, a decade ago, we might have, 20 qualified applicants that we would rank when we had an opening, and rank them for, as kind of a waiting list. I have not seen that, nor any departments I've talked to anywhere around the country. Those days are over. The recruitment has become a real challenge. We'll be lucky to get 1 or 2 qualified applicants out of a pool of 50 now or more. So I think all agencies struggle with that. But as it's important for us to have a staff that reflects our community. The reality is I think our biggest struggles, and we might have 3 to 5% of applicants that are Black. We might have 4 or 5% that are female. These are 2 areas that have been a challenge to recruit in those areas. So, in our profession as a whole, we need to change the perception in minority communities if we expect to recruit them. We need to promote, honorable lifestyle and infuse the idea of being a change agent in a struggling profession. We are struggling right now, but we desperately need diversity in a wide array of perceptions and experiences. But I also must say we've been very fortunate here in Buda. Some of the surrounding agencies have had vacancies for years that they've never been able to fill. And we've been very fortunate that when we have an opening, we've always been able to fill it with a qualified applicant. And I think we've also been fortunate that we haven't had to advertise or try too hard. Word of mouth, I think, from our agency is how we recruit most of our good officers. But that is probably one of the greatest challenges I think law enforcement has at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. We have another question that asks if you can speak to background checks and if they require full transparency across agencies.
Yes, and this is a great opportunity for me to go back and talk about TCOL and how the state of Texas has been far ahead of most of the country. And I did hear yesterday in the president's police reform bill that we're going to be required now to share information, and this is something that the state of Texas has mandated since probably 2007, I think, or 8. It's been a long time. And back in those days, prior to that, around the state of Texas, we had a term that you would hear a lot called Gypsy Cops. And a Gypsy Cop was one that would bounce around from agency to agency, and they might have worked for 20 different agencies before they got to yours. And the reason they were able to do that was that nobody would share their personnel files. And we would do background investigations on people, but they weren't willing to open up their files for fear of a lawsuit. So you really weren't able to find the truth in anybody's background as far as their work history. Well, TCOL came in and said, no, we're gonna fix that. And so every agency is required to release all of their personnel records on any police officer that they have, and also imposes not only that duty on the law enforcement agency to release the information, but also puts the duty on the applying agency they are mandated to contact every prior law enforcement agency that they've been employed in, which TCOL knows and tracks, so there's no way to hide that. It mandates that we go and check their personnel files at every prior agency that they worked for. So in effect, it ensures that we are able to do full, thorough background investigations on anybody that we hire in the state of Texas. And I will tell you, that has been a really good thing for law enforcement and our profession. It ensures that we get rid of the bad cops. They can't survive now. Anytime an officer gets written up for any infraction, any documented disciplinary action, that stays with that officer for the rest of their career. And so that is how the state of Texas has fixed that issue. So now there's federal mandates coming down that are going to require that, but we've been doing that for years. Good question, though. Thank you for that.
This question sort of expands on that and was from the same individual. Can you explain the intricate process that you put your potential team of officers through before you hire?
Okay. First, it would depend on if they are hired with their certification. If they already have their basic peace officer certification, we would basically start them, if they didn't have their certification, they'd have to go to an academy. But regardless, if you're going to an academy or getting hired by a law enforcement agency, a few things that you have to do. First, you've got to have a psychological exam and be checked off on by a doctor. There is a physical, and then from there you also have to do drug tests. Some agencies vary in that regard. Then you're going to go through a field training program. Our agency here, that consists of about 3.5 to 4 months. So depending on if they show up certified or not, it could be anywhere from 3.5 months to over a year from the time that we hire somebody before they can actually work independently as a police officer on the street. That's another area that I think, TCOL has been a little ahead of things, and that psychological exams have existed ever since I've been in this career, which is 25 years. So I think we have some good safeguards in place to make sure we get the best applicants as police officers.
Chief?
Sure, jump in.
I'd like to toss in a little something there, just for perspective from somebody who's been through the process here. This is my second agency. I got into law enforcement when I was 45. So had a lot of different jobs, blue collar, private sector, public service, had a job in a grocery store. Number of different interviews, number of different applications. Having been with a prior agency and coming here, I got to tell you, I was really impressed with the stringent expectations that this department has for their candidates. I've had the opportunity to sit in on a couple oral board examinations where we really take a good look at the kind of officer we're selecting. Do they, are they a good fit for the department? Are they a good fit for our community? Not only do they meet standards, but is this someone's going to work well for us too? But also going through the field training process called FTO as a probationary police officer, it's no joke. We have 4 months of make it or break it training. That's when you get out there and you actually start learning about how to apply the training and the education you've had. There's no substitute for doing that. Like I said, it's a make it or break it. And having had all the experience I've had, having had 20 years of prior training and being in various positions, I had to work. I was really concerned whether I would make it or not. So I'm really impressed with the high standard this department has, and that goes across the board for every candidate. Everybody has to put in. Like I said, make it or break it. There have been officers that have washed out. Most of them have made it. We have a really effective training cadre, a lot of checks and balances in the process. Officers get what they need to go out on the street and do the job, and I can attest to that.
We, as far as the background leading up to, I'm sure Freddie can attest to this. We do thorough background. We're going to talk to everybody, in your history. And we send officers all over the state to do that. We'd rather do that in person to do a thorough background. The training is intense, and our standards are much higher than what the state mandates in many areas. But the goal of the field training program, I guess, is twofold. It's to ensure, that this person is a good fit for the agency and they're going to be able to work here. But it's also in their best interest. And, when they get to the end of that program, they need to have the confidence that they can independently handle any call for service that they'll get. So the last thing we want to do is to send out somebody that's not confident or competent to handle a call that they're not prepared to handle. That's part of the professional policing and the importance of training, as I spoke of earlier. It's a necessity. If we're going to have a professional police force, training has to be a priority. So we don't skimp in those areas at all. Good question. Thank you.
Okay. I have a question that sort of relates to our background checks. How often does the department do psychological evaluations?
We always do them initially, and then from there, conditionally. If we felt a need, then we would have them visit the doctor again. Aside from that, we also do have a clinical advisor, basically a team of mental health professionals that serve our department and look after the mental wellness of our officers. That's a program that fortunately was funded last year, and I guess this will give me an opportunity to broaden that. We have a wellness program, and that wellness program consists of 4 pillars, and it's physical wellness, mental wellness, emotional wellness, and spiritual wellness. So physical wellness, we do promote, good eating and exercise, and we have physical standards that they have to meet every year. The mental, emotional wellness, that's where our clinical advisor and her team come in. And then we also have 2 department chaplains, and that kind of covers the spiritual wellness. So those 4 pillars make up our wellness program, and that's something else, that I think is important. The reality is this profession can be a very destructive one. The life expectancy of a career cop is 57 years old, and that's over the national average is, 22 years higher than that. So why is that? There's reasons. It can be a very destructive profession. So that being the case, we wanted to make sure that we were at the forefront of keeping our staff well in all aspects. Anything to add, Freddie? Feel free to jump in.
No, I would like to point out how kind of groundbreaking that is. We have a saying in our department, policing forward. We like to be ahead of the curve on a lot of things we do. We were ahead of the curve on body cameras, on the activation system in our patrol cars, de-escalation training. Looking at where we are today, we're trying to be ahead of the curve on that as well. This this whole wellness program that we have is kind of revolutionary. We're very fortunate to have it because the mental health and welfare of officers is something that's been neglected. We're fortunate the city approved it and we have it. And the point I'm making is it's part of the checks and balances that need to be there in our profession and have been deficient in the past. A lot of our officers take advantage of the resource there. There's a lot that goes on in this job. You get dirty, for lack of another word. You get disaffected, home life, family life. There's so many things that contribute to the destructive nature of this profession. And so again, having this resource, the mental, the physical, the spiritual, and I forgot the other one.
The emotional.
There you go.
The emotional wealth.
Is something that I hope other departments across the nation will start to emulate, and I'm really glad that we have it here.
This profession is high in all the wrong categories, you know, divorce, suicide. It's that being the case, you know, I felt compelled to try to change the course. And I would just want to compliment the city manager and city council for approving, you know, these innovative measures that we've been able to take in many areas. We couldn't do it without the support of the city government, for sure. Good question.
Okay, we have quite a few questions that came in, so I'm going to try to get to as many of these as possible. The discussion about defunding the police seems to focus on the way we put our police officers in so many different roles: enforcer of laws, marriage counselor, drug intervention, and so on. What do you think? Should we redistribute some of the roles allocated to police officers now to other specialists?
Question.
I think, yeah, that is a good question. I think that there are some areas that could be civilianized in law enforcement. But I would caution any government looking at defunding police right now. In effect, what that would do, and I'll give you an example. We have a mental health unit, 2 mental health officers, great officers that work here. If we were cut back or defunded, what would go first would be those proactive measures that we do, like mental health. You know, 40% of all law enforcement shootings is tied somehow to mental health. So that being the case, to neglect that is just putting people in your community at higher risk. Some people, and I must say, when we first started this many years ago, I questioned is that really the role of police to be working with individuals with mental health issues, and I've become a believer, because what I've seen is, because we have good officers that, you know, are proactive, and they, you know, if we have people in our community that have issues, they work with them and they'll do wellness checks, and they actually form relationships, and so we can ensure that they, you know, are well and don't fall into crisis. And because usually if you wait till that point, then that ends up resulting in bad things, being jail, or, you know, again, like I mentioned, a lot of shootings, you know, are tied to mental health. So if we were to defund in our department, let's say, that would probably have to be one of the first things that would go. And then community outreach and crime prevention. Now, I'm sorry to say this, Freddie, but your job would have to, because we have to provide an essential service, meaning when people dial 911, our first and foremost priority is to respond, you know, to calls for service. And so, you know, if we start defunding law enforcement, in effect, what we're doing is we're taking out all of the proactive measures that we're capable of doing, and we would be left with just, you know, officers responding to calls. And if it was defunded to where we didn't have enough officers on patrol, what would result would be there would just be no proactive activity, and we wouldn't be preventing any crime at that point. We would just be reporting it. we'd get a call for service, go make a report, and go on to the next call. So I've heard that a lot, that discussion about defunding police. I think, you know, right now what's going on in our country, that's the wrong direction. Right now, we need more than ever to be proactive and out there doing some of the things, you know, Freddie, and you speak to this, some of the things that you do, those are very vital and important to have those, you know, that connection with the community to be successful. You know, I think you said it earlier, we're only successful if we can partner with the community. And if we can't do that, we're not going to be very effective at what we do. I'm sure you can build on that, Freddie. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm kind of chomping at the bit here as everybody's talking. I'm a student of law enforcement, of criminal justice. I hold 2 degrees, one in criminal justice administration and the other in sociology. So I like to look and think about these things. But in a historical perspective, law enforcement is no stranger to multitasking, having various roles. 19th century law enforcement, they were not only responsible for deterring crime and keeping the peace, but they were doing boiler checks, doing health and human services calls. You know, of course, animal control came in at that time. Mental health wasn't such a big thing back then, but we've taken on a number of roles and been exposed to a number of things. So it is in our history. We're no strangers to it. But in our current structure right now, something that we do take advantage of is a lot of interagency cooperation. So it's not necessarily that a matter of training or taking less tasks off us. It's how can we better do our job, and one way to do that is not just through the community, but through various services that are out there. On any given call, we could we can interact with the constable's office to get civil advice. I mentioned our partnership with Hayes Caldwell Women's Center. We have victim services within our department. We partner with CPS, Adult Protective Services. So it's law enforcement in a lot of ways is a team game. Using what resources you have, not just within your department, but outside as well. So being able to expand on those further and further partner, not just with other agencies, but I'm going to give you an example. A lot of things have come across my desk since the inception of this position a year ago. We just kind of celebrated an anniversary. Formed a formation with the Downtown Merchants Group under our business watch. A lot of opportunities came out of that. Opportunities to engage our public in different ways. Another one that came across my desk recently was someone who was at a chamber meeting. If I remember correctly, he's a behavioral analyst and wanted to contact me to reach out and see what kind of services she could provide, how we could partner together and reach the community better, be more effective in the services we provide, and engage our community in a different way. So there's lots of opportunities out there. There's lots of different ways that we can do our job better and be better. And so it's just a matter of how we do that, not necessarily taking away duties or defunding certain places. It's a matter, for me, it's a matter of how we grow as a profession.
Add one more point to that. And you're right, Freddie, a lot of important partnerships. MCOT is another one, that mobile crisis outreach team that works with mental health. Those are all really important. But I think you run the risk when you defund an agency of taking away the ability to be proactive. And the proactiveness, I think, is very important for success. And so, I just think that they should be really careful before you start that. And I would pose this to you as well. Talk about funding. Would you want to have the cheapest cop that money could buy serving your community? Probably not. But I just feel like there could be a lot of negative consequences when you start defunding police. And I think where it would hurt the most is those proactive programs that really get out and connect with the community best. And those programs just make it, patrol more effective. Patrol is the backbone of any law enforcement organization. All these other proactive things that we do just kind of bolster that and make them more effective. And I think we could quickly become from an agency that prevents crime to just an agency that reports crime. And I don't think any citizens really want that kind of law enforcement. Great question, though. We have another one, Brittany?
Oh, yes, sir. We have several. Another question was, I'm sorry, I just lost it. 1 second. Who provides your officer training? How often are they completed by officers, especially in regards to use of force?
Wow, that's a pretty broad question. We do a lot of use of force training. So let me just take the last year, and Freddie, you may have to help me. Use of force, the firearms, that's something that we have annual qualifications, TCO mandates that you have to qualify at least annually. So we do that along with our other firearm training days. They have some other force options generally that they roll into those training days. Generally, we'll have defensive tactics. I think we put everybody through that the last year. But a lot of all that training is important, but what's equally important is, the other type of training, the de-escalation training, crisis intervention training, all those are equally important. But that's a really broad question, because when you talk about use of force, there's so many applications in that. That could be anything from, training on a felony stop or felony takedown to building clearing to, Freddie, I bet you that encompasses probably 50 different things. It could, yeah. But we definitely train. Like I said earlier, I think I would guess, and Freddie, you can give your opinion, but I think we probably get 3 to 4 times the number of training hours that TCO mandates. We certainly go well above and beyond what's mandated, and that has always been a priority. Another force type training I can think of last year, we also did the active shooter training, put the entire department through. That also had a medical component. We worked with our area fire and EMS and worked, major scenario training from start to finish, from, the shots being fired to the medical triage, treatment, and evacuation. And so that's a pretty broad question, but I think we certainly pay due attention to that type of training here.
Want me to jump in on that, Chief? I'm just thinking, I will just add that I've had more training with this department and going on the 5 years that I've been here than I have had in 10 years in the private sector. I understand the question focused more on use of force. We have to have a balance in our training as well. We've had plenty of de-escalation, critical incident, mental health training. All our officers get mental health training so that we're well-rounded. It's not just about use of force. If the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem becomes a nail, and that is not how our training works. Yes, we're proficient with the weapons we're entrusted with. We have to be. But also at a patrol level, there's a constant process of training out there that we'll do. If we have some uncommitted patrol time, we might go to an empty building and practice how to clear a building, how to do so safely for not just for citizens, but for officers as well. There's a balance there. We'll take time to conduct mock traffic stops on one another, or felony car stops, so that we don't muck it up when we actually get out there and do it. It's not a regular thing that we do, so we got to be able to get it right. Talking about various conversations about use of force scenarios that we might encounter, just kind of forecasting what we might do, how we might act, legal considerations, conduct situations. So there's a constant mindset of training in this department. I've always been real impressed with not just the type of training, but the quality of training we have. And it's way more than just TCOL standards. It's a department standard that we set, and I'm real proud to be a part of that.
We do try to have our training diverse also, in the sense that we don't want to just train within our agency. We like to have a balance. Yes, it's good to have certified instructors and within your agency and various things, but there's also a benefit to outside training. So we're not just doing our thing. I think you run the risk if you're just training yourself, you're really just training with your blinders on. I think it's healthy to not only have people, trainers within your organization, but it's also very good to go visit other organizations, and that way you're constantly, tweaking and updating and learning new skills and new tools. So we try to, have a balance here, I think, in our training. Next question, Brittany.
Okay, what can we do as a public to aid our officers in the service you provide? Are there any plans to be more present and visible in the community to build relationships?
Absolutely. It's essential. I think I said that in my opening statement. It is essential for us to be successful. We have to be connected and working with our community. This whole COVID thing has really put a damper on that. I think Freddie mentioned earlier, we were rolling with a Citizens Academy, making great progress, and we were making a lot of progress with the programs with Neighborhood Watch and all these outreach, working with the neighborhoods and HOAs. Well, that all came to a screeching halt when we could no longer have mass gatherings. And so I think this is a product of trying to figure out how we're going to stay connected with the community. And Freddie, just a thought, we might need to consider continuing that Citizens Academy virtual like we're doing here. I mean, this might be the thing that we need to do. But one thing I do know, that we will not be successful if we are not closely connected to and working with our community. And that, that position, that Freddie on right now, I knew it was very important and essential for us to provide a high level of quality service. And so again, I'm grateful to the city management and city council for funding these programs, because they're really important. Anything you want to add to that, Freddie? I'm sure this is your wheelhouse.
Just, yeah, you can see I was smiling. This is my dream job, really. I'm glad to be here, happy to help. We had so much momentum going, especially after launching the Citizens Police Academy. For those of you who don't know, it's a really necessary element for any department to have, because it's important for your community to be informed about how, not just how law enforcement conducts itself and why they do the things they do and how they do them, but for your community as well. It gives your community an opportunity to get engaged and to have awkward conversations, or to cross those boundaries. And we were doing that really well. We had our first 2 weeks of the academy. Everybody was really pumped. I was excited. I was super stoked. I, spent almost a year working on that program, and COVID. So my dream job suddenly became the bane of my existence, because we had really founded the program on direct social contact. That's really how you accomplish things, is being face to face, being what I call in community with people, like we were at our recent protests, and some of our outreach and mentoring opportunities that we've had. There's no replacement for that. So around April, when we kind of figured out how things were going to go, I had to 180 and really start looking at opportunities to engage virtually, not reinventing the wheel, but getting it to roll a different direction. We're still functional in a lot of senses, as far as maintaining contact with our neighborhood watch, our business watch. I'm still in contact with our Citizen Police Academy students. But this is an opportunity for members in our community to find ways to engage us. And if anybody has any ideas, anybody has any thoughts how we could continue, or ways that we can improve our relationships, our partnerships in this current COVID environment. We are in phase 3. Restrictions are lifting, but we still have some restrictions in place. It's made it quite challenging, but I could go on and talk about the program. I love to hear myself talk. I love a captive audience. But let's just say that we have a very robust program. It is really poised to benefit our community, to benefit our relationship, their relationship with our police department, and be in community with them.
Thanks, Freddie. Brittany, I see that we're over time, so I'm going to ask permission, because we need you and Micah to be willing. Are y'all willing to run another 10 or 15 minutes?
Yes, sir. We've been discussing that on the backside, and we are good to go as long as you are.
I am good to go, and if it turns out, we're going to get to a point where we still have a lot of questions and we're just not going to be able to do them all tonight, then we can do this again. So let's keep them coming as long as you and Micah are willing. I certainly am.
Yes, sir. I'm going to ask the next 2 questions in conjunction.
Okay.
They basically go hand in hand. How do you track and document the bad officers in order for them not to be hired in another police department? Similar to that is, what is your policy with officers reporting fellow officers for inappropriate behavior or excessive use of force?
Well, inappropriate behavior or excessive use of force, that's a mandate. You don't have an option. If you don't report it, then you're just as guilty for not reporting it. In regards to the, discipline and the hiring, once again, that TCOL has a good role, effective role in that. So if I end up terminating an officer, I classify that termination. There's different categories I can check, and that form goes to TCOL. If I put on that separation form dishonorable, that pretty much is a career ender for that officer. Probably no agency would ever hire them again. It's hard to overcome that. Like I'd said earlier, there was a previous question. Your disciplinary record will follow you for the rest of your career. So, that's a given. Any agency that would potentially hire an officer is going to have all that information, as TCOL would. And sometimes when you terminate an officer and you classify them that way, they have the ability to challenge that through TCOL, and they'll have a judge and they'll hear the case. And twice in my career, I've terminated for dishonorable discharge, challenged, and won both times. So there are a lot of checks and balances, I think, in our profession that you don't see in many other professions, and rightly so. I say this all the time too. Freddie, you'll remember, I'm sure I said it with you in our sit down, that, you know, this profession is held to a higher standard, and that's right, and that's just. And everybody coming into this profession needs to know that and accept that. I say that it's right because if you're going to give somebody the authority to take away the most precious thing we have in this country, which is our freedom, I think that warrants being held to a higher standard. So not only can actions within, you know, your actions within the department affect your career and end it, anything you do off duty, you could lose your license and you'll never be a cop again. If we had an officer that, you know, went out and got a DWI or got an assault family violence situation, well, they're done. TCO will take your license. You'll have a hearing, but you're probably going to lose your license, and then you just don't work as a cop anymore in the state of Texas. You can't. So again, I think, you know, the people in this state, you know, you're going to hear a lot of things coming down from the federal government, you know, and then police reform, and I think you'll be pleased to see that a lot of these mandates, we've been doing this for a very long time. It's not going to change much in how we operate here. Hope that answers both questions.
Okay, we've received a few questions regarding mental health training as well as mental health of our officers. So I'm going to lump a few together and generalize the question, but what type of mental health training do your officers receive? Do you foresee that we will make more psychological evaluations mandatory? And do you feel like regular mental health check-ins would be beneficial?
It's a really good question. So our training for our mental health officers, it's like any other division. We get them as much training as we can, and most of that training is in the area of crisis intervention. As far as internally, I have considered that, doing like an annual mental wellness visit. We have considered that, and then I haven't completely ruled it out. I don't know how that would be perceived by all. You know, some people are very private and they really don't get thrilled when they have to go talk to a psychologist. But I think that, you know, although we have, you know, in situations, if we know somebody's going through, you know, struggling of, you know, any issues, we would certainly, that's when our clinical advisor and our psychologist that does our screenings, we would, you know, reconnect to them for that. But as of right now, we don't mandate like annual or biannual mental wellness checks, but that's not a bad idea. You know, when we have the highest suicide rate of any profession, that causes me concern. I've known a lot of cops that retire and a year later they're dead. You know, for any profession to have a life expectancy of 57 years old, there's a lot of problems there. And so my belief is that, you know, wellness, overall wellness, mental wellness, those are all factors, and we can't neglect that. So although we don't mandate that now, we offer those services. They're available to them, and I think that our officers are taking advantage of that. And just so you know, they can call this team 24/7, and I won't know that any particular officer went and visited. When we get the invoice, it's just a number. So I don't know who in our department is going to these visits with a psychologist. I just know a number. And that, my feeling there is it takes out that stigma that might exist where somebody may not seek help or therapy because they don't want to be, labeled. So that's why we set it up that way. So nobody will know, but that officer and the psychologist, and although I don't know who all is going, I know that a great many of our officers take advantage of that, which makes me happy. It makes me feel better that, that they have a professional that, they're reaching out to and making sure that we're, well. We want to have a well-trained staff. We want to have a staff that's just well in all aspects, mental, physical, spiritual. We believe that it's all interconnected. So to answer your question, no, we don't mandate that across the board now, but I haven't ruled that out either. We will see. This program is only a year old right now, and we may make some tweaks as we go along. Right now, it's voluntary, but I can tell you it is being taken advantage of. Great question.
Does Buda PD plan to create a community council of some sort similar to City of Kyle?
I'm not familiar with that. What a community council is? Is that like a advisory board for the police?
I'm assuming that that's the intent of the question.
We don't currently, and I was unaware that Kyle had that. I know that San Marcos had a training advisory council where they have, but that's just geared towards training. My guess is that this is probably like reviewing use of force issues, perhaps. I've heard a lot about that, and I'm not totally opposed to that, but I would say that we kind of already do have a citizen review. When we have use of force incidents, it goes up to the city manager, who is a civilian, and if it's of any significance, it goes to city council. These are all elected civilians. So I think we have, adequate oversight, if that's kind of what the question means as far as, a citizens review board. I think we kind of already have that, and the way we handle our the way we're set up currently. So hope that answers the question.
Chief, I just want to throw something in there too. A lot of these questions turn to how well do we police ourselves, levels of accountability, and to add on to what we're talking about the type of accountability that we have here. Also, and when it comes to our body cameras, our sergeants have to review random video, and not just specific incidents. They don't just cherry pick. They have to go through and watch and see how the officers conduct themselves, officers on their shift. If there's any malfeasance or any misconduct, they're duty bound by the Code of Criminal Procedure to report that. There's a lot of shalls in the Code of Criminal Procedure, as well as the fact that any use of force incident is automatically reviewed. There's no getting out of that, and these things are escalated up through our city council or city manager. So there's adequate accountability in this department, as well as just the way that we look out for ourselves is not just the police department, but as a family. We watch each other's conduct, not just on the job, but off the job as well. A lot of us live here, and we go to the same grocery stores, same gas stations. So it goes well outside the scope of our duties as well.
Yeah, that's a good point, Freddie. That is one of the duties of patrol sergeant, and that has to be documented, that random video review. And like I said, everything we do, and this isn't something new. We've had body cameras. In fact, we were the first agency in this region to get body cameras, and then we were actually the test agency when we developed the auto activation on body cameras. So we were the first in the country to have that technology. So we have the tools available to review all of our interactions, but that mechanism, that duty upon the sergeants, like Freddie said, any use of force is going to get multiple reviews throughout the chain of command, but there's that, weekly random review that they have to do and document as well. And that's also a good training tool, especially for new officers. That gives the sergeant the ability to really see how they're doing when, nobody's around them. Are they performing up to our standards? Are they, conducting themselves safely and fairly and whatnot? So it creates a lot of training opportunities as well as oversight, which is a good thing.
Okay, we have two questions that are similar and along the lines of community outreach. You mentioned engaging the community. What outreach has been done by your department specifically with people of color? Have you considered any partnerships with local high schools to establish law enforcement programs to help with the recruiting more diverse, competent cadets?
We do. Freddie, I think I'll let you take this. You've been instrumental. I know the career days and mentoring and those things. Why don't you field this question?
Specifically, basing anything we do on race, color, or creed, no. We try to incorporate the entire citizenry in what we do. We do specific events, say at the high school, or community functions, and the different ways we partnership. And recruiting has not really evolved yet. That's something good to look at. How can we, selling ourselves and incorporating a more diverse part of the community? That's something great to consider. We've had our plate full. I'm actually a one-man army. I've done all I can this past year just to ground the program and give it a firm foundation. And not to talk around your question, but we really wanted to follow two principles: to be culturally competent and socially aware. And this is a good question. This is one area that it would be great to expand on. Let's take a look at that. Let's see what time and resources we can devote to it. It's a great area, and it's definitely within the wheelhouse of community policing and crime prevention. Look me up. I'm on the website. Open ideas. Let's do this together.
Yeah, and a lot of the things that we do, everything from our Shop with a Cop to the work with the YMCA and the other groups, the real point of that is to build bridges with the next generation, which, in our current climate, I think, this is pretty important. The fact is, a lot of the citizens don't trust the police. We've done a bad job. And so we've got to do better, but we can't just think for the here and now. We also need to build bridges with that next generation. And, we need that. We need young people to be interested in a career in law enforcement. We really do need to spend some time and energy doing that. That our Shop with a Cop program is one of the things that I ask all of our guys to do, and they don't get paid for. They have to volunteer their time. But I can tell you that we've made a lot of strong relationships, and I see kids, that were 8, 10 years ago, and now they look like adults. And I think it's kind of what we really need to be thinking about right now, is correcting ourselves, building better relationships, gaining trust and confidence from the public. And that does include the younger generation as well. We need to make sure we build those bridges where they've been burned down. Definitely. Good question.
There have been several questions and remarks also regarding diversity in our agency, such as what does diversity look like within the ranks, not just patrol officers? Are we recruiting or attempting to recruit Spanish-speaking officers? And does our diversity align with that of our community?
I believe our current makeup does reflect the community pretty well. You know, being bilingual is a great asset, and we actually compensate bilingual officers. They will get paid a stipend if they have the ability. So, and that's just one of many stipends that are available to our officers that, again, you know, city manager and city council have approved these salary packages, and we're grateful for that. But absolutely, we that is a huge benefit and a huge asset. If I can find an officer that knows sign language someday, that would be my day too. That would be another great asset for us to have. But yeah, I do think it's very important that we reflect, you know, the makeup of our community. I think that goes along with, you know, the trust and confidence as well. I don't know if that completely answers, or they wanted specific numbers, but I guess I'll leave it at that unless you have something further, Brittany.
And, you know, Chief, I'd like to add that you got to keep in mind that, as Chief mentioned prior, we're in a difficult spot, especially now, finding qualified candidates. We definitely love to have a more diverse department, to recruit from a more diverse part of the community. We'd love to have everyone represented here, but you know, the expectation that we can go out and necessarily make that happen isn't all too realistic. And you know, and I've encouraged a lot of people lately that if they want to be the change that they want to see come out and be a part, and you know, maybe we'll see a resurgence. Maybe we'll see a lot more people stepping forward, and from various cultures and various parts of our community, to, you know, our county, our state, to step up and be a part. We definitely welcome that. We do have a very diverse department here, Black, white, Hispanic. I don't think we have anybody Asian here yet, but you know, we're all the same color when we put on the badge, and that's a wonderful thing in our profession, and we definitely welcome it. Unfortunately, we have some limitations right now, and things aren't looking any better. But we can hope for change, something we can look forward to.
There have been some colleges that have done studies, and we know this is coming, that the younger generation, for the most part, this is not an attractive profession right now. So we're going to have to work harder than we have in the past to attract this next generation, because what we've done doesn't look good, and it's not appealing, not attractive to the younger folks, and we need to make efforts to change that. We're going to have to, or we're going to be in trouble. So that is an area we got to focus some time, energy moving forward, definitely.
Okay, I think we are getting close to ending today's meeting, so I'm going to ask one more question on our list.
Okay.
How does Buda PD assess community needs and translate this to additional workforce training?
Brittany, you broke out a little bit. Can you read?
Sure. How does Buda PD assess community needs and translate this to additional workforce training?
Assessing community needs. Well, I think, again, you have to be connected to your community to hear what they want and meet the needs of the citizenry. We always welcome, you know, I say this everywhere I go. every HOA I've talked to, any group, I always say, we will never pass up an opportunity to meet with any group of citizens. Just send the invitation and we'll be there. So I think we do have a very active community here. We hear from the community daily. Quite often we have visitors here a lot, even in the COVID environment, we have a lot of visitors that come in. But it can never be enough. I mean, we really have to now more than ever to stay connected to the community, hear their needs, respond to their needs, and meet their needs. So, I mean, I think we do that pretty well, but we could certainly do better. I see you want to say something, Freddie. Go ahead.
That obvious, huh? All right. In regards to that question, with the advent of this position, I hear from the community all day long, and it's good, healthy communication, and it's not just one-dimensional. It's two-way. It's within various parts of our city, within our community, and that goes from City Hall all the way down to our 18 subdivisions that we have, the various groups that we work with. Just to give you an example of how we might respond to community feedback, our neighborhood watch group, good two-way communication with a lot of them, the block captains. We've developed a different matrix, but we can receive feedback for things that are going on in their neighborhood. We get a lot of that stuff that wouldn't necessarily come to our attention. We can't be everywhere at once, despite what a lot of people think. You don't want a cop on every street corner. And so when we engage the community becomes our eyes and our ears. I mentioned being able to effectively deliver police services. They help us do that. And we're getting better. We're growing more. We're starting to engage more parts of our city, businesses, residential, commercial, good relationships with places like Walmart and HEB. So that's just one example of the many ways that we receive feedback, and we're able to respond to that, or either become aware of a condition that we need to pay attention to, or maybe change our patrol habits or the way we're doing things. It's also a way of our community holding us accountable too. Sometimes there's some other issues that come up, and we're doing our best to be attentive to them. I can promise you that. We're more a small group of guys and gals going out there trying to do a good thing, but we put our best foot forward every day, and we do it with the help of our community. We don't do it alone. This is a symbiotic relationship. I like doing the hand thing when I talk about the police being the public and the public are the police. That's vital and necessary, and can't do it without you.
Yeah, and community policing has always, from day one, from our inception, been a priority here. And I bet in my Rolodex, you and I both, Freddie, I probably, any subdivision, I probably have 4 or 5 contacts I can reach out to if we have an issue in that subdivision. I know you do as well. And we've always encouraged our guys to get out of their cars and, go and have face-to-face interaction. Now, this day and age, I mean, I know that's not as comfortable to do, but I've always asked our guys and gals, when you're driving through a subdivision, roll your windows down, acknowledge people, don't just be that unknown officer, driving by in a car. Put the windows down and interact with the community. And I think we've been able to hire and train people, officers that have that mindset that we are part of this community, and they actually are. They live in this community. We're part of that community. So, yeah, that's kind of who we are and what we do. Could we do a little bit better? Yeah, and we will. Absolutely. I see Micah came on. I'm guessing our time is running.
Yes,
Okay.
that's a great place to end the conversation. I wanted to thank Chief Kidd, Officer Erdman, and Brittany Tate with the Buda Police Department for having this virtual town hall meeting. Kenneth Williams, our city manager, as well. I wanted to thank all the participants for joining on. We had a good participation tonight. I think we had close to 60 people at the peak of this conversation. We weren't able to get to all of the questions that were raised, but we did record all of those questions. And I believe the police department is going to be working to issue out a frequently asked questions or to have some written responses to some of the questions that were posed tonight. And I believe the department is also looking to consider having another town hall meeting, whether virtual or hopefully in person someday, to continue these conversations. This was the first one of probably many conversations to come on this important topic.
Yeah, and also I would just add, we have an online submission form. If you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us that way. And I would, in closing, I'd just like to say, we all here at Buda PD feel truly blessed to serve this great community, and Buda is a good place to be. It's a great place to be. Thank you all for participation. I've enjoyed it. I think we will probably do this again. Good night.